In the early hours of New Year's Eve, the quiet routine of the Cavlin household was abruptly shattered by a tragedy that would later become the focus of true crime stories and documentary features. The stillness of the morning was pierced by a frantic phone call to the Manhattan police station. The voice on the line belonged to Lorie Hacking, trembling with emotion and hysteria. Struggling through tears, he relayed a chilling discovery. He had found his wife, Sheile Cavlin, lifeless in their bathroom. Rod described a horrifying scene. Sheile's body lay submerged in the bathtub, the water around her stained red with blood. The chilling details of the call sent shockwaves through the precinct, marking the beginning of a criminal investigation. This is a true crime and documentary case that took place in New York. It's about a young woman named Sheile Cavlin, was born on October 14, 1969, into a loving and ambitious Jewish family in New York City. Her parents, both hardworking professionals, instilled in her the values of education, determination, and kindness from a young age. Sheile grew up in a close-knit household filled with warmth and laughter. She excelled in academics early, showing a natural aptitude for math and problem-solving. Her family valued cultural traditions, and Sheile often participated in Jewish community events and holiday celebrations. Growing up in the bustling city, she developed a strong sense of independence and resilience. She attended well-regarded public schools, where her teachers often noted her curiosity and leadership qualities. Despite her quiet demeanor, she was known for her fierce determination and ability to persevere through challenges. As Sheile matured, her drive for excellence extended beyond the classroom. She pursued higher education with an unwavering focus, eventually earning a prestigious degree in asset management. This accomplishment was not merely a reflection of her intellect, but also of her tenacity and dedication. The degree served as her passport to the highly competitive world of international finance. Before long, Sheile secured a coveted position in the Swiss banking sector, where she thrived. She demonstrated an innate ability to analyze financial markets and manage complex multi-million-dollar portfolios, earning her the trust and admiration of her clients. Her success was meteoric, and she quickly became a rising star in the industry. Despite her flourishing career, by 1998, Sheile began to sense an unshakable void in her life. She had achieved financial independence, lived in one of the world's wealthiest cities, and had the unwavering support of her family. Yet the dream of building her own family and embracing motherhood remained unfulfilled. This yearning grew stronger with each passing year. Determined to change her destiny, Sheile made the bold decision to take her future into her own hands. In February 1998, she attended a Jewish singles event designed to help professionals like her find their soulmates within the community. It was at this event that Sheile's life took a pivotal turn. Among the attendees was a 26-year-old man named Lorie Hacking, also a professional in the financial sector. Rod's youthful energy and sharp intellect immediately caught Sheile's attention. Despite the noticeable age difference, the two discovered a deep connection rooted in shared values and mutual ambitions. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, revealing a shared vision for success and stability in life. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and what began as a chance meeting quickly evolved into an intense and all-encompassing romance. Their relationship blossomed with remarkable speed. Rod and Sheile became inseparable, spending nearly every waking moment together. Their love story unfolded like a whirlwind, defying conventional timelines. While some acquaintances raised eyebrows at the rapid progression of their relationship, for Sheile and Rod, everything felt destined. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, the couple made the bold decision to marry. Their union was celebrated with joy and optimism, as friends and family gathered to witness the start of what appeared to be a promising future together. Soon, the couple had two beautiful children, a boy and a girl, into their lives, completing the family Sheile had always dreamed of. For over a decade, the Cavlin family appeared to live an idyllic life. Their Upper West Side residence was a picture of stability and comfort, filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of family traditions. However, beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, tensions and challenges began to simmer. On the morning of New Year's Eve 2009, the peaceful rhythm of the Cavlin household was shattered by an event that would forever alter their lives. At approximately 7:30 a.m., a frantic phone call from Lorie Hacking to the Manhattan police station broke the early morning calm. Speaking through tears and hysteria, Rod reported a horrifying discovery. He had found his wife Sheile lifeless in their bathroom. Her body was submerged in a bathtub filled with bloody water. The chilling details of the call sent shockwaves through the precinct. Emergency responders were dispatched immediately, racing against time in the hope of saving Sheile's life. Following instructions from the 911 operator, Rod removed Sheile's body from the water and attempted resuscitation. He desperately performed CPR, but it quickly became evident that his efforts were in vain. Sheile's body was cold and unresponsive, her lifeless form an undeniable testament to the tragedy that had occurred. Overwhelmed with grief and despair, Rod covered her body with a blanket from the bedroom and waited for the authorities to arrive. Within minutes, a team of police officers arrived at the scene. The Cavlin's residence, located in one of Manhattan's most affluent and secure neighborhoods, stood as an incongruous backdrop to the unfolding tragedy. The officers entered the home cautiously, taking in the signs of an interrupted family life. Children's toys scattered across the living room floor, remnants of holiday preparations evident throughout the apartment. But their attention was soon drawn to the bathroom where Sheile's body lay. The scene in the bathroom was both heartbreaking and perplexing. The bathtub's water, still tinged with blood, had begun to cool. The floor was slick, evidence of the struggle to pull Sheile from the tub. Her head bore a visible wound, a small but unmistakable gash on the back of her skull that continued to bleed. Nearby, the bathroom's cabinet door hung askew, its hinge partially torn from the frame. The placement of the cabinet and the condition of the hinge suggested that Sheile might have slipped while attempting to steady herself, leading to a fatal fall. The police's initial assessment leaned toward the conclusion that Sheile's death was a tragic accident. The Upper West Side's reputation for safety and the absence of obvious signs of foul play reinforced this theory. Forensic experts arrived shortly after the officers, meticulously combing the scene for clues. Their investigation confirmed several key details. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle beyond the bathroom, and no indications of robbery. Investigators increasingly leaned towards the belief that Sheile's death was an accident. However, doubts and complexities soon began to surface. The detective handling the case decided to speak with family members, hoping to confirm the sequence of events leading to the tragedy. During the interviews, it was revealed that Sheile's body was first discovered by her daughter. The young woman, traumatized and shocked by what she had seen, managed to recount to the police officer the harrowing events of that night. It was uncovered that the previous night, Sheile's 2 children had been sleeping in her bed, which was a common occurrence in their household. Waking up in the middle of the night and noticing her mother's absence, the young woman instinctively went to search for her. She stumbled upon a horrifying scene in the bathroom, her mother's lifeless body submerged in the bathtub. Stricken with fear, the child hurriedly contacted her father. Rod Cavlin, who had recently separated from Sheile and moved into an apartment on the same floor of the building, received the call. Crossing the corridor, he quickly arrived at Sheile's apartment. Entering the bathroom, Rod pulled her body from the water and immediately called emergency services. The daughter's account of events closely matched Rod's description, reinforcing the police's initial theory that Sheile's death was a tragic accident. The authorities promptly informed Sheile's relatives about the incident, leaving the family devastated and in mourning. An autopsy and forensic examination were scheduled for the following day to ascertain the precise cause of death. However, to the investigators' surprise, the autopsy was abruptly canceled. When the medical examiner contacted the investigative team to begin the procedure, he learned to his astonishment that it would not take place. This unexpected turn of events puzzled the examiner, who wondered how such a crucial step could be bypassed. The investigation revealed that a rabbi from the synagogue Sheile regularly attended had intervened. In adherence to Orthodox Jewish tradition, which views autopsies as desecrations of the deceased's body, the rabbi had contacted an organization specializing in Jewish burials. This organization swiftly petitioned the police for access to the site of the tragedy to perform religious rites required by the family's faith. Permission was granted, and the rabbi, along with a team from the burial organization, arrived at the scene. They cleansed the bathroom, removing all traces of blood, and prepared Sheile's body for burial according to religious customs. This process effectively destroyed all potential evidence before it could reach the police's forensic department. The family, deeply grieving and trusting the rabbi's guidance, agreed to forego the autopsy. Appreciative of the assistance and reassured by the explanation of the accident, they saw no reason to object. Within 24 hours of her death, Sheile was buried in a somber ceremony attended by hundreds who came to pay their respects and offer condolences. However, the rapid burial and the destruction of potential evidence left lingering doubts in the minds of Sheile's parents. The notion that their daughter's death could be anything other than an accident began to trouble them deeply. The improbability of such a fatal outcome from a mere fall in the bathtub haunted them, even though no concrete evidence supported their suspicions. The New York Police Department's ability to investigate further was severely hampered by the absence of forensic evidence. Unwilling to let the matter rest, Sheile's family decided to hire a private investigator to probe deeper into the circumstances of her death. The private investigator began his inquiry by speaking with Sheile's relatives. Their statements painted a picture of a marriage far from idyllic. Rod and Sheile's relationship had been deteriorating for some time. Although they had celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in 2008, the following year marked the beginning of significant marital strife. Rod, it was revealed, had been struggling with instability in his career. He frequently changed jobs, unable to secure long-term employment. Financial difficulties compounded the stress on their marriage. Adding to this burden was Rod's gambling addiction, which had spiraled out of control. He had begun investing large sums of money into gambling, further straining their finances and their relationship. Sheile's growing concerns about Rod's behavioral changes began as small frustrations but soon escalated into significant and troubling issues. Initially, Rod's neglect of family responsibilities was an occasional annoyance. However, it quickly spiraled into a larger problem as his obsessions with computer games and backgammon tournaments consumed more of his time and attention. What once seemed like harmless hobbies turned into costly addictions, with Rod dipping into the family's savings to fund his participation in gambling tournaments. Adding to her distress was the discovery of Rod's infidelity. During his numerous trips for backgammon tournaments, he had been unfaithful, a truth Sheile uncovered by accessing his emails. The betrayal was devastating and marked a turning point in their already fractured relationship. Determined to regain control of her life and protect her children, Sheile sought and obtained permission for a religious divorce, a significant and difficult step within their Orthodox Jewish community. Although the couple maintained the outward appearance of marriage for the sake of their children, their separation was undeniable. Rod had moved to another apartment within the same building while the official divorce process was underway. Their relationship remained strained and contentious, punctuated by frequent conflicts and heated disagreements. While they made efforts to present a united front for their children, the reality was far from harmonious. Rod's behavior became increasingly alarming. Sheile confided in friends about his aggressive and hot-tempered nature, recounting specific incidents that made her feel unsafe in her own home. She suspected that Rod was monitoring her movements and invading her privacy. Sheile believed he had been entering her apartment while she was out, checking her emails and possibly spying on her in other ways. Her suspicions deepened when she noticed unusual behavior from Rod, including the possibility that he had installed a surveillance camera in the building's corridor to track her comings and goings. These unsettling revelations added layers of complexity to their marital discord and raised serious questions about the circumstances surrounding Sheile's death. To uncover the truth, her family hired a private detective who began piecing together these accounts and formulating a theory that Rod might have been involved in Sheile's untimely demise. The detective's first priority was to determine whether a crime had occurred within Sheile's apartment. However, gaining access to the scene proved to be a challenge, as the apartment had been sealed by authorities. Undeterred, the detective obtained a court order to unlock the apartment and arrived at the site accompanied by New York police officers. At the apartment, the detective attempted to use the key provided in advance but found the lock unusually tight. The situation took a strange turn when Rod emerged from his apartment at the end of the corridor, claiming he had heard noises and came to investigate. His sudden appearance raised suspicions. When questioned by the detective and police, Rod took the key and effortlessly unlocked the door. This act left the detective wondering if Rod had been deliberately monitoring the situation or if his timing was a mere coincidence. Once inside the apartment, the detective began a meticulous search for evidence to substantiate his theory of foul play. One of the most puzzling discoveries was the absence of Sheile's phone. Relatives confirmed that Sheile had been home on December 31, but her phone was nowhere to be found. The detective located the phone's charger in the apartment, but not the device itself, a detail that deepened the mystery surrounding her death. The detective's attention then turned to the bathroom, the site of Sheile's death. He closely examined the hinge that investigators initially believed Sheile had torn off during a fall. However, the more he scrutinized the hinge, the more implausible the original theory seemed. The hinge was securely fastened to the cabinet, and dislodging it would have required immense force. Even considering Sheile's weight and the circumstances of a potential fall, the likelihood of her causing such damage appeared highly improbable. After lengthy discussions with law enforcement, the detective argued that the evidence pointed not to an accident, but to kill. The investigators, however, remained unconvinced, citing insufficient proof to substantiate a homicide theory. Faced with this impasse, a decision was made to perform an autopsy to conclusively determine the cause of death. This development led to serious deliberations within Sheile's family. More than 2 weeks had passed since her burial, and the prospect of exhuming her body presented a profound dilemma. In Orthodox Jewish tradition, such interventions are deeply frowned upon, often viewed as a desecration of the deceased. Religious leaders expressed strong opposition to the exhumation, adding to the family's anguish. Despite these religious and emotional hurdles, they deemed it crucial to uncover the truth about their daughter's death and agreed to the exhumation. However, this crucial step was not only fraught with moral and religious considerations, but also entangled in legal complexities. To proceed with the exhumation, the family required a special order from the prosecutor's office. Securing this document was no easy feat, despite their explicit consent. The process dragged on for nearly 3 months and was plagued by bureaucratic delays and legal obstacles. Finally, with all necessary paperwork in hand, the exhumation and subsequent autopsy were carried out, revealing shocking truths that forever changed the narrative of Sheile's death. The autopsy results were nothing short of startling. Medical examiners determined that Sheile had not died from an accidental fall, as initially reported. Instead, her death was caused by asphyxiation resulting, which also fractured several of her neck bones. This grim discovery confirmed the detective's long-held suspicions and provided irrefutable evidence that Sheile had been murdered. With this revelation, the official cause of death was amended, and the case was reclassified as a homicide. The detectives' relentless efforts now bore fruit, as the findings prompted the New York Police Department to reopen the investigation with renewed urgency. Investigators immediately dove into the case, meticulously re-examining every detail. They analyzed phone records, financial transactions, and any other pieces of information that could provide insight into Sheile's life and interactions. This comprehensive approach extended beyond family members to include anyone connected to Rod and Sheile. The nanny, housemater, and even the lawyer managing their divorce were interviewed, each contributing valuable pieces to the puzzle. Among the revelations was a troubling account from the divorce lawyer, who described unusual behavior from Rod during their court proceedings. At their first divorce hearing in May 2009, Rod argued that he was unable to pay alimony due to unemployment. When the presiding judge made a lighthearted remark about Rod potentially giving up his expensive hobbies, Rod's reaction was explosive. His outburst in the courtroom offered a glimpse into his volatile nature, which left an indelible impression on those present. Rod's retaliatory actions against Sheile became increasingly malicious. He launched a campaign of false accusations, attempting to tarnish her reputation by claiming she led an indecent lifestyle, misused family funds, and even abused drugs. Rod went as far as contacting Sheile's employer, fabricating stories about her alleged violent behavior towards their son. Although an investigation was initiated in response to these allegations, it ultimately found no basis for Rod's claims, further highlighting his efforts to discredit and punish Sheile. The most disturbing aspect of Rod's actions came to light during an interview with the couple's son. The boy revealed that his father had coached him to recite damaging statements about his mother. This manipulation of his own child painted a harrowing picture of Rod's character. His actions had severe consequences. During a subsequent divorce hearing on July 7, 2009, Rod was prohibited from being alone with his children. This restriction remained in place even after Sheile's death, as custody of the children was transferred to Rod's parents. Rod's fury over losing custody and control of his children further fueled suspicions about his potential motives. Further details emerged from interviews with a former caregiver for the children, who shared intriguing observations about Sheile's final days. On December 30, Sheile underwent a costly keratin hair treatment, an indulgence worth several $100s. Such treatments require strict aftercare, including avoiding moisture and heat for several days. Investigators questioned why Sheile, known for her meticulousness, would disregard these guidelines by taking a bath the following day. This contradiction led detectives to speculate that Sheile had not entered the bathtub willingly on the day of her death. While compelling, this line of reasoning alone was insufficient to establish Rod's guilt. The investigation took another turn when detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the couple's building. The footage captured Rod exhibiting peculiar behavior on the night of Sheile's death. At approximately 4 a.m., Rod was seen leaving his apartment dressed as though he were heading outside. He returned a short time later. The building's night watchman, who was questioned by the police, noted the unusual timing of Rod's outing. Rod, known for rarely leaving his apartment at odd hours, had engaged the watchman in conversation, offering him chocolate bars upon his return. Detectives interpreted this interaction as a calculated attempt by Rod to establish an alibi. With these discoveries, Rod became the primary suspect in Sheile's murder. The detectives' challenge was to piece together the evidence and establish a concrete case against him. Central to their inquiry was the pressing question: what could have driven Rod to commit such a heinous act? During the investigation, an important fact came to light. Despite having gone through 2 contentious divorce hearings, Sheile and Rod were still legally married. This status had significant implications. Without a finalized divorce or a valid will naming alternative beneficiaries, all of Sheile's assets, valued at over $5 million, would automatically be inherited by Rod. This potential windfall added a financial dimension to the case that investigators could not ignore. Another critical discovery was that on December 31, 2009, the very day before her death, Sheile had scheduled an appointment with her lawyer to revise her will. Her intention was to exclude Rod entirely from her estate. This decision, had it been executed, would have deprived Rod of the considerable inheritance. Investigators concluded that Rod, already a suspect, would have been well aware of Sheile's plans if he had been monitoring her. The financial motive became undeniable, and the impending loss of $5 million provided a compelling reason for kill. To secure Sheile's assets while the investigation progressed, all her financial holdings were transferred to a secure account. Meanwhile, suspicions grew that Rod may have employed spyware or other surveillance methods to track Sheile's movements. Surveillance footage from the building showed Sheile arriving home at 8 p.m. the night before her death, talking on her mobile phone. However, the phone was missing after the crime. Investigators became certain the phone had been in the apartment at the time of her death and decided to revisit the crime scene for another search. What they found was both shocking and perplexing. During their renewed examination of the apartment, Sheile's mobile phone was discovered on her bedside table, connected to its charger. This was an extraordinary development, as during the initial searches, conducted both by the New York police and the private investigator, the phone had been conspicuously absent. Photos taken during those searches confirmed its absence. The only plausible explanation was that someone, likely Rod, had accessed the sealed apartment and returned the phone. Whether this act was a foolish blunder or deliberate taunt directed at the investigators remained unclear. Rod was promptly summoned for questioning. However, he had retained legal counsel who advised him to exercise his right to remain silent. This left investigators scrambling to find other evidence of his involvement. A breakthrough came when they examined Rod's phone records, which revealed frequent calls to a number registered in Jacksonville, North Carolina. The number belonged to Deborah Holmes, a married woman 14 years Rod's senior with 3 children. Rod and Deborah had reportedly met at a backgammon competition 5 months before Sheile's murder and had since carried on a passionate affair. They maintained their relationship through in-person meetings at tournaments and by playing online together. Believing Deborah might hold critical information, the investigators reached out to her for an interview. To their surprise, Deborah informed them that her lawyer had instructed her not to speak with them. The twist deepened when they discovered that her lawyer was the same attorney representing Rod Cavlin. This connection raised suspicions that Deborah might have been more deeply involved in Rod's affairs than initially assumed. Law enforcement officials turned their focus to electronic communications between Rod and Deborah, hoping to uncover incriminating messages. Sheile's recently recovered phone became a key piece of evidence. Unfortunately, investigators found that all messages and data on the device had been professionally deleted, leaving no trace behind. Even forensic experts were unable to recover the information. The meticulous nature of the deletions pointed directly to Rod's involvement and his efforts to stay one step ahead of the authorities. His actions, including the rapid cleaning of the crime scene, the erasure of messages, and his tight-lipped response to questioning, seemed designed to frustrate investigators at every turn. As months turned into years, the case grew colder. Rod continued to evade justice, bolstered by a lack of tangible evidence. The missing DNA, fingerprints, and fibers compounded the difficulties for law enforcement. Despite their suspicions, the police were unable to bring charges against Rod, and the case stalled. It appeared that Rod's planning had created a near-perfect crime. 5 years passed. The investigation into Sheile's death seemed destined to remain unresolved. However, in a surprising twist, Deborah Holmes contacted the police out of the blue. By this time, her relationship with Rod had ended, and she appeared willing to share new information. Investigators wasted no time inviting her to the station. Deborah Holmes immediately came in. It turned out that she and Rod had broken up a few months earlier, prompting her to contact the police. What Deborah shared with investigators over the next 3 days left them stunned and horrified. Her revelations painted a chilling picture of Rod Cavlin's twisted ambitions and schemes, which extended far beyond his deceased wife's millions. Deborah disclosed that Rod had become consumed with regaining control over his children and accessing Sheile's fortune. With no custody rights and no direct access to Sheile's estate due to his status as a suspect, Rod devised increasingly sinister plans to achieve his goals. One of Rod's most vile schemes involved his own daughter. Knowing that his parents held custody of the children, Rod intended to manipulate his 15-year-old daughter into staging an assault. The plan was to falsely accuse his own dad of the crime, leading to the grandfather's imprisonment and the subsequent loss of custody rights. In this scenario, Rod would gain control of his children and, by extension, access to Sheile's wealth. He even attempted to bribe his daughter into agreeing to this heinous plan, offering her money as an incentive. Meanwhile, Rod had been recklessly depleting the funds in an account that Sheile had specifically set aside for their children's education. This was the only account he could access, and he used it for personal expenses and gambling. Rod's parents, who were managing the children's care, became alarmed by his behavior. They confronted him about his squandering of the children's future savings, leading to a heated dispute. Rod's anger toward his parents escalated to the point where he seriously contemplated taking their lives. In 2012, Rod confided in Deborah about one of his horrifying plans. He proposed having his daughter poison her grandparents by putting rat poison in their tea. Rod believed that as a minor, his daughter would face minimal consequences if caught. Deborah managed to dissuade him from carrying out this malevolent idea, but Rod's depravity didn't stop there. He considered other horrific actions, such as setting fire to his parents' house and jamming the doors to ensure they couldn't escape. At one point, he even proposed arranging a sham marriage for his daughter to a Mexican man, which would force her to relinquish part of her inheritance to him. Listening to Deborah's testimony, investigators were appalled by the depths of Rod's depravity. Deborah had spent years gathering evidence against him, carefully collecting recordings and data on hard drives. Realizing she was dealing with a dangerous psychopath, she waited until Rod lost interest in her before turning the evidence over to law enforcement. The recordings contained hundreds, if not thousands, of Rod's conversations with various individuals. Investigators now faced the arduous task of analyzing this trove of information to find concrete evidence against him. Their efforts paid off. In one recorded conversation with a backgammon acquaintance, Rod casually mentioned having keys to Sheile's apartment and the ability to enter it at any time. This revelation aligned with earlier suspicions that Rod had tampered with the crime scene, including returning Sheile's missing phone. Among the files, investigators found evidence that Rod had attempted to frame his daughter for Sheile's death. He had fabricated an email, supposedly written by his daughter, confessing to pushing her mother during an argument. The email claimed the altercation led to Sheile's fatal fall in the bathroom. With this mountain of evidence, law enforcement finally had enough to charge Rod Cavlin with the murder of his wife. On November 1, 2015, Rod was arrested, Sheile's family, who had endured years of uncertainty and grief, awaited his trial with cautious optimism. However, victory was not assured. Much of the evidence was circumstantial, and a skilled defense attorney could potentially cast doubt on Rod's guilt. Detectives continued to work tirelessly, searching for definitive proof to secure a conviction. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While in prison, Rod confided in a fellow inmate, describing the details of his wife's murder. He even demonstrated the gesture he used to strangle her, providing a chilling reenactment. When investigators reviewed surveillance footage of the prison, they found that Rod's actions perfectly matched the findings of Sheile's autopsy. This was the irrefutable evidence they needed, amounting to an almost direct confession. The trial lasted an arduous 7 weeks, during which the jury was presented with the full extent of Rod's heinous actions. They heard about his calculated plans to murder his wife, harm his parents, and manipulate his own children. Each revelation painted a portrait of a man driven by greed and devoid of empathy. The jury was appalled by his cold-blooded and deceitful nature. It took them 2 days to reach a final verdict. In March 2019, the court found Rod Cavlin guilty of the demise of Sheile Cavlin, his wife, and the mother of his children. Despite the lack of direct evidence, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole only after 25 years. Police officers, accompanied by search dogs, scoured a vast city landfill in hopes of finding any clue that could definitively confirm the grim fate of a pregnant woman. This landfill stretched over a huge area filled with more than 4,000 tons of solid waste. From the very start, their mission felt like searching for the proverbial needle in a haystack. Indeed, it seemed nearly impossible to find something as small as a scrap of clothing, let alone the remains of a missing woman. Nevertheless, despite the daunting odds, the officers persisted, methodically combing through endless heaps of discarded trash. Day after day, their dogs sniffed out even the faintest hint of human remains. Weeks turned into months, and morale sometimes wavered under the oppressive heat and the sheer volume of waste. Then, after 2 full months, a breakthrough changed everything. One of the lead detectives spotted a discolored, tangled mass that appeared to be human hair. On closer inspection, they realized it was not just hair. It was part of a severely damaged human body. Thanks to a combination of dental analysis and other forensic methods, experts ultimately confirmed the worst. The remains belonged to pregnant Lorie Hacking. Imagine, if you will, the picture-perfect couple. 2 people deeply in love, united in marriage, and joyfully expecting their first child. Their life appears to be on the brink of a new and blissful chapter. Then, in the blink of an eye, that bright image is shattered, leaving only confusion and heartbreak. The enchanting wife abruptly vanishes. The devastated husband is left in a haze of despair. The police, despite their best efforts, cannot find any immediate explanation for what happened. This is where our story begins. The story of Mark and Lorie Hacking, 2 young, successful, and seemingly happy individuals whose life together was admired by everyone around them. Yet, one fateful July morning in 2004 would redefine everything. Lorie went out for a jog and never returned. Mark Hacking came into the world on April 24, 1976, in the city of Orem, Utah, in the United States. He was the 5th child in a devoted and deeply religious Mormon family headed by Doug and Janet Hacking. With 7 children in total, 4 sons and 3 daughters, the Hacking household was vibrant, active, and guided by the principles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This strong affiliation with the Mormon faith shaped every aspect of family life, from daily prayers and church attendance to communal gatherings where faith and family were at the center of every conversation. Doug Hacking, a respected pediatrician with a well-known medical practice, provided for his large family's every need, ensuring they enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle and a well-regarded social standing within their community. Growing up, Mark was easily recognizable by his bright red hair, smattering of freckles, and friendly, outgoing demeanor. Whether it was in church youth gatherings or casual neighborhood events, young Mark was at ease, striking up conversations, cracking jokes, and making people feel instantly at home around him. The Hacking children were all high achievers in their respective pursuits. Some excelled in academics, others in community service, so Mark constantly felt pressured to keep up with his siblings' accomplishments. Early on, he discovered that he could gain attention or avoid embarrassing situations by spinning small lies or exaggerations. These fibs started innocently enough, claiming he had scored higher on tests than he really had, or pretending he knew how to play a musical instrument better than he did. Over time, though, the tendency to fabricate stories became more entrenched, serving as a coping mechanism for Mark whenever he felt inadequate. When Mark turned 19, he followed the traditional path set out for many young men in the Mormon Church by embarking on a missionary journey. Initially, all seemed promising. His outgoing personality helped him connect with new communities, and he found success in drawing people to the faith. Fellow missionaries spoke of his easy rapport with strangers and his knack for storytelling, which, despite often being more embellished than strictly factual, proved compelling. Yet the bright veneer eventually cracked. After sunset, Mark would occasionally break mission rules by socializing, attending parties, and engaging in activities the church frowned upon. Word of these breaches in conduct soon reached his superiors. To shield both Mark and the family from public scandal, the church sent him home prematurely. Upon his return, Mark resorted to more deceit, insisting it was all a misunderstanding rather than a failing on his part. In stark contrast to the turmoil swirling around Mark's life, Lorie Suarez's background seemed simpler and more grounded. She was born on December 31st, 1976 in California, in a significant event that would change her trajectory forever. 4-month-old Lorie and her older brother Paul were adopted by Thelma and Harold Suarez. Lorie's childhood was marked by both challenges and warmth. In 1987, after Thelma and Harold divorced, Lorie moved to Utah with her mother, while Paul remained in California with their father. This separation made her mother-daughter bond grow even stronger, and throughout her teenage years, Lorie would lean on Thelma for both emotional and practical support. Lorie thrived socially at Orem High School, where her earnestness, kindness, and sincerity drew people toward her almost effortlessly. Classmates spoke of how she radiated positivity, whether through her warm smile or her willingness to stand up for others who felt left out. Elected class representative multiple times, Lorie also found passion in sports, particularly baseball, where she dedicated countless hours honing her skills. Yet, life was far from lavish for the Suarez family. Lorie had to balance her schoolwork, her extracurricular interests, and a part-time job at a local car wash to help her mother make ends meet. Even so, Lorie never lost sight of her dream: to one day marry a boy from her church community, build a loving and stable home, and become a devoted mother to the children she hoped to have. Mark and Lorie first crossed paths in high school. Despite being in different grades, they moved in overlapping circles within the Mormon youth community, attending the same dances, weekend outings, and religious study sessions. The spark that flared between them was immediate. People who knew them at the time recall how Mark could make Lorie laugh like no one else, his humor and quick wit captivating her from the start. Their courtship was a whirlwind of shared faith, mutual friends, and bonding over hopes for the future. By 1999, 22-year-old Lorie and 21-year-old Mark decided to tie the knot, a development that seemed to delight everyone around them. Their families offered enthusiastic blessings. Well-wishers from church praised their devotion to each other, and for a while, it appeared the Hackings were set to thrive both personally and professionally. Their marriage became something of a model union within their religious community. Mark was frequently observed showering Lorie with small tokens of affection: flowers, heartfelt notes, or simple acts of kindness. Their joint commitment to their faith led them to teach Sunday school together, where they guided younger members in learning church doctrine. Mark, quick to offer help when parishioners or friends needed a hand, gained a reputation for generosity and service. Lorie, meanwhile, completed her studies and landed a job as an assistant at bank. She was diligent and conscientious, applying herself fully to make a stable income for the household. According to Mark, he too was devoting himself to self-improvement, claiming to be enrolled at the university, chasing academic distinction that would elevate their combined future prospects. But this vision of marital and professional harmony existed only on the surface. In a secret that Mark guarded as closely as any he had told before, he had actually dropped out of college back in 2002. Rather than confronting Lorie or admitting the truth, he concocted an elaborate charade. Each morning, he would gather his textbooks and leave their home as though heading to campus, sometimes even discussing fictitious classes or imagined professors at the end of the day. Once Lorie herself departed for her job at bank, Mark would quietly slip back home, spending the day doing whatever he pleased, reading, playing games, or simply biding his time, before emerging in the late afternoon to return from his alleged lectures. This persistent masquerade spoke to a deeper dysfunction in Mark's psyche, one that grew from a need to be admired, to measure up to perceived expectations. Meanwhile, Lorie remained entirely in the dark about his deception, trusting that her husband's words aligned with reality. She continued to labor at her job, saving money for the future they believed was just around the corner. The start of a new life with a baby on the way, a possible move for Mark's postgraduate opportunities, and the promise of an ever closer bond nurtured by their shared faith. All day long, Mark would hole up in the apartment to play video games, immersing himself in fictional worlds while keeping up the charade that he was engaged in serious academic work. Whenever Lorie came home in the evening, he would dramatically complain about the many hours he had supposedly spent wrestling with difficult coursework and demanding professors. To underscore his claims, he would sometimes lock himself in a small side room under the pretense of writing papers or completing online exams. This performance further convinced Lorie and any friends who came by that Mark was genuinely investing his days in rigorous study, forging a path toward graduation. Sometimes, as part of his ruse, Mark went so far as to arrange rendezvous with Lorie on the university campus. On these occasions, they might meet at the student center or pass each other in a corridor as though Mark was on his way to a lecture. He would even point out certain buildings or classroom locations to make everything seem even more believable. This clever choreography gave Lorie no reason to doubt him. She had always supported Mark's aspiration for higher education, and she took pride in believing that her husband was on track for a meaningful career. When the time finally came for Mark to graduate from the university, an event that Lorie had been joyfully anticipating, he came up with yet another deception. He feigned an illness on the day of the graduation ceremony. He claimed a sudden high fever or a bout of food poisoning prevented him from attending the official walk across the stage. Lorie, truly concerned for his health, wholeheartedly believed him. She, along with other family members, decided to host a small celebration later on, hoping to honor his accomplishment once he felt better. To keep up appearances, Mark posed for photos in a rented cap and gown, using a photo editing application to insert the image of a diploma in his hand. He even managed to produce pictures that vaguely resembled the backdrop of a real graduation event. Delighted and utterly convinced by these photos, Lorie and the family cheered him on without suspecting a thing. Before long, Mark's claims escalated once more. He began describing supposed trips to various states around the country for interviews at medical universities, each with its own renowned program. The flights and lodging expenses, however, were largely funded by Lorie, who spent the bulk of her own salary to underwrite his so-called future. She believed deeply in her husband's ambitions, seeing in him the potential to become a doctor who would follow in his father's footsteps as a respected medical professional. Mark's father, after all, was a pediatrician of high repute, and the family name carried a certain status. Lorie's trust in Mark was so absolute that she never considered investigating these trips or asking to see any tangible acceptance letters. In 2004, Mark announced the biggest news yet. He had been accepted to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Medicine, specializing in oncology. He claimed to have received glowing references for his commitment and academic achievements. The news spread rapidly among friends and relatives, generating a flurry of congratulations and excitement. Both Mark and Lorie spoke eagerly of their imminent cross-country move. They told people they wanted to settle down in North Carolina, where Mark would, in theory, deepen his medical knowledge and begin the next stage of his career. Determined to stand by her husband's side, Lorie quit her steady job, an act that demonstrated her full faith in him and her willingness to make sacrifices to see him succeed. By July of that year, the couple hosted a heartfelt farewell party. Family members, church friends, and co-workers gathered to celebrate the bright future that seemed to lie ahead. Adding to the joyful atmosphere was the fact that Lorie was pregnant. a development that made the upcoming move feel like a leap into a wonderful new chapter of their lives. Everyone who attended raised toasts to Mark's perseverance and Lorie's unwavering support, remarking on how blessed they appeared, both personally and professionally. Yet, beneath this facade of happiness, an unsettling incident unfolded only a few days before they were supposed to leave. On July 16th, while at work, Lorie received a mysterious phone call that left her visibly distressed. According to a few coworkers who saw her reaction, she looked pale and anxious when she hung up. Without offering any explanation, she hurried home, leaving those around her puzzled. She would not speak about what had upset her so deeply, and by the next day, she seemed determined to continue with the move as planned. At the farewell party held on July 18th, Mark and Lorie again put on a united front. They smiled, posed for pictures, and thanked guests for their well wishes. No one at the gathering even hinted at suspecting that a terrible secret might lie behind all their positivity. On the morning of July 19th, 2004, 27-year-old Lorie adhered to her usual routine. She enjoyed jogging in the Memory Grove area, often choosing the wooded trails for a more leisurely run. She had planned to head straight to her workplace afterward. The night before, she and Mark agreed that he would drive her to her office by 7 a.m., ensuring she arrived on time. However, when Mark woke up that morning, he realized that Lorie was nowhere in the apartment. The bed was empty. Her usual belongings were not scattered around as they might be after a nighttime routine, and he simply assumed she was still out jogging. Feeling tired, he went back to sleep, only fully waking again at around 8. When Lorie still had not returned by that time, Mark looked out the window and noticed her car was also gone. In his mind, the simplest explanation was that she had decided not to wake him, choosing instead to drive herself to work. Yet by 10:11 a.m., a creeping worry led him to call the police. During that call, Mark stated that Lorie had gone for her morning run but never came home, emphasizing how uncharacteristic it was for her to deviate from her schedule or fail to check in. Soon after, he discovered that Lorie's work uniform, carefully laid out the night before, remained untouched at home. This alarmed him enough to file a missing persons report at 10:30 a.m., officially telling law enforcement that something was seriously amiss. Police officers responded quickly, searching the area near Memory Grove Park. They discovered Lorie's car parked near the entrance, yet there was no sign of any struggle or disarray inside the vehicle. It looked as though she had simply pulled in, locked up, and vanished into thin air. Mark, deeply distressed, contacted Lorie's family and her coworkers to find out if anyone had heard from her. The unanimous response was that Lorie was responsible, punctual, and not at all prone to impulsive or unexplained absences. In light of her pregnancy and her ordinarily reliable nature, alarm bells rang for everyone involved. Mark, along with friends and members of their church community, organized a search of the trails within Memory Grove Park, combing through wooded paths, undergrowth, and adjacent areas. But there was no sign whatsoever of Lorie, prompting more intense efforts by local authorities. Almost immediately, detectives noticed discrepancies and peculiar circumstances that cast a shadow of doubt over the case. For instance, Lorie's personal belongings, which included her purse with important documents, her wedding ring, and various key cards, had all been left behind at the couple's house. Investigators wondered why she would head out for a morning run without taking items she might normally keep close by, especially her wedding ring and her car-related keys. Further fueling their suspicions was the discovery of a brand new mattress in the bedroom, still with some of its packaging. Mark explained that he had thrown out their old mattress only a few days prior, allegedly because Lorie had heavily stained it with blood during her menstruation. He claimed the stain was so severe that it was unsalvageable. When investigators pressed for details, asking where they had slept in the interim days before he bought a replacement, Mark mentioned that they had simply slept on the bare box spring frame, lacking an actual mattress to lie on. Another item that caught the detective's eye was a hunting knife found on the nightstand next to the bed. The blade contained blood traces, and when questioned, Mark insisted that he had used it the previous day for some mundane activity, perhaps cutting some food, leaving the residue behind. Yet the timing seemed remarkably suspect. Even more troubling was the discovery that Mark had purchased the new mattress that very morning, July 19th, at precisely 10:23 a.m., a mere 12 minutes after he first reported Lorie missing. Police found the receipt inside his car, making it clear that he had been out shopping for a mattress almost immediately after claiming to be in a panic over Lorie's disappearance. This series of odd coincidences formed the basis for the investigators' suspicions. Additionally, they noted the position of the driver's seat in Lorie's vehicle. It was pushed far back from the steering wheel, suggesting that someone significantly taller than Lorie had been sitting there. Given that Lorie stood at about 5'3" and typically drove with the seat much closer to the pedals, the seat's position raised the question of who had last driven the car and why. All these strange details piled up, painting a bewildering picture. A wife who vanished without any of her usual belongings or personal effects, a freshly purchased mattress arriving almost in tandem with her husband's first frantic call to the police, a suspiciously placed hunting knife with traces of blood, and a driver's seat pushed far back in the missing woman's car. Neighbors, friends, and local news outlets began buzzing with speculation, while the police launched a more comprehensive inquiry. Were Mark's explanations plausible, or did they serve as a carefully orchestrated cover for something far more sinister? And how did this tie in with the suspicious phone call Lorie had received just days earlier? At that point, no one knew if Lorie's disappearance was voluntary or if she had fallen victim to foul play. Nonetheless, investigators quickly realized the importance of scrutinizing Mark's timeline of events and verifying every detail he provided. The detectives, determined to uncover every possible clue in Lorie Hacking's disappearance, diligently examined every corner of the couple's home for evidence. In the course of their search, they made a startling discovery among Lorie's personal notes. A letter addressed to Mark, in which Lorie stated she would divorce him if he did not change his ways. This written message was as clear as it was devastating. It revealed that Lorie, who had always been known as caring and responsible, was reaching the end of her patience. Given the letter's ominous tone and the fact that Lorie had vanished under such suspicious circumstances, the investigative team's suspicions immediately narrowed to Mark Hacking. They needed to determine if he had played a direct role in Lorie's disappearance, or if there was some other explanation for why she had suddenly dropped out of sight. The more they dug, however, the more incriminating information piled up against Mark. Police soon discovered that he had been living a life of relentless deceit. In stark contrast to the impression he had given his wife, family, and friends, Mark was not a rising medical student who had gained admission to a prestigious program in North Carolina. In fact, he had never even completed his undergraduate degree, having dropped out of college almost 2 years prior. Yet, day in and day out, he masked this reality with elaborate stories, meticulous lies, and outright forgeries. The most significant and grandiose of Mark's fabrications came to a head in mid-2004, when he proclaimed he had been accepted to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Medicine, focusing on oncology. This new claim took the family by storm, prompting celebrations and well wishes from all corners. Even more consequential was Lorie's decision to quit her job, effectively sacrificing her stable income so they could make the move to North Carolina. A farewell party was held in July where guests brought gifts, toasted to the couple's supposed bright future, and showered the expectant parents. Lorie was 5 weeks pregnant, with love and support. Everyone in attendance believed their story wholeheartedly, seeing them as a dedicated young couple stepping confidently toward a shared dream. But a moment arrived that would irrevocably change everything. On July 16th, just days before the planned move, Lorie made a phone call to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill to inquire about financial aid options and specific program details on behalf of Mark. During that conversation, she learned a harrowing truth. The school had no record of Mark Hacking, and there was no indication he had ever been admitted or even applied. Initially stunned, Lorie sought further confirmation, hoping it might be an error or misunderstanding. She tried to cross-check facts, but each piece of evidence drove home the same conclusion. Her husband had fabricated yet another chapter in his elaborate web of lies. Realizing the enormity of Mark's deception, Lorie felt betrayed and shattered. She had given up her job and was pregnant, believing wholeheartedly in the future Mark had painted for them. Overwhelmed by anger, sorrow, and disbelief, she wrote him a letter on July 18, clearly stating that she could no longer go on living in a relationship based on deceit. In that letter, she laid out an ultimatum, telling him she was prepared to leave him if he could not change. Despite her fierce love for him, Lorie was not willing to resign herself to a life built on a lie, particularly not with a baby on the way. Feeling desperate and needing to confide in someone, Lorie shared her predicament with her closest friend, but refrained from revealing everything to the rest of her social circle. As a result, most people, including family and mutual acquaintances, believed they were still the perfect couple. The contrast between the outward appearance of harmony and the private turmoil growing behind closed doors could not have been sharper. Witnesses reported hearing an argument in the Hacking household late in the evening on July 18, a heated exchange that suggested Lorie had finally called Mark to account for his many lies. This tension set the stage for the events of July 19, when Lorie suddenly and ominously disappeared without a trace. By now, the detectives had acquired powerful indications that Mark was the main suspect. The letter threatening divorce gave Lorie a clear motive for confronting him, and Mark, who had built his self-image around misleading everyone, now had a dire reason to take drastic action. The investigation took on a darker cast when forensics confirmed that bloodstains on a hunting knife found in the couple's bedroom indeed belonged to Lorie. Further examination uncovered more blood residue in the interior of Mark's car and in a nearby dumpster. The police also discovered a blood-soaked mattress that had been sliced apart, but despite these striking signs of violence, they initially lacked the ultimate proof of a homicide: Lorie's body. In the days following Lorie's disappearance, Mark's behavior grew increasingly erratic. On July 24th, authorities found him naked in a motel room, wearing only slippers and appearing to be in a state of deep mental distress. After evaluating him, professionals concluded that Mark might be feigning mental illness to evade responsibility. Sensing that he was rapidly losing control of the narrative he had so carefully spun, Mark allowed 2 of his brothers to visit him in the psychiatric facility. Perhaps feeling cornered or grappling with guilt, he finally broke down and disclosed a nightmarish confession. He admitted his years of duplicity, how he had lied about being in college, lied about attending medical school interviews, and how, on the night of July 19th, he had shot Lorie in the bedroom while she slept. She had been 5 weeks pregnant. Mark claimed that he believed this to be the only way to stop Lorie from exposing his deceptions, which had escalated beyond his ability to contain them. In a chilling step-by-step account, Mark revealed that he had disposed of Lorie's body and the blood-stained knife-cut section of the mattress in different dumpsters. Early in the morning, he had driven Lorie's car to a nearby park to stage the illusion that she had gone out for a run and never returned. Then, he placed a phone call to the police, feigning panic and concern to solidify his story. Mark's brothers, horrified by his confession, immediately passed the information on to the authorities. Armed with Mark's own words, investigators finally had what they needed to place him under arrest on August 2, 2004, charging him with suspicion of murder. Yet the detectives still faced one massive challenge. They did not have Lorie's body. The entire case's resolution depended on recovering it to provide tangible proof of Mark's guilt and to give Lorie's family a measure of closure. Spurred on by Mark's admission that he had used dumpsters, law enforcement teams sifted through vast amounts of refuse in landfills and collection sites, determined to locate any identifiable remains or possessions linked to Lorie. The community, horrified by the possibility that this vibrant young woman had met such a grim fate, watched in anguish as search crews worked day and night to uncover the truth of what really happened to Lorie Hacking. Police officers armed with search dogs descended on the sprawling city landfill, determined to find any trace that might finally confirm the grim fate of Lorie Hacking. This landfill, covering a massive area with more than 4,000 tons of solid waste, was the designated drop-off point for refuse from the very dumpsters Mark Hacking had used to dispose of incriminating evidence. From the outset, the undertaking resembled an attempt to locate the proverbial needle in a haystack. A mountain of garbage towered around them, battered by the elements and compactor machines. Indeed, it seemed all but impossible to recover anything as small as a shred of clothing, let alone a missing woman's remains. Yet, despite the daunting odds, officers persisted, methodically scouring through countless piles of discarded debris. Day after day, their dogs sniffed for even the faintest hint of human remains. Weeks stretched into months, and morale sometimes flagged under the oppressive heat and the sheer volume of waste. Then, on October 1st, 2004, fully 2 months after Mark's startling confession, a breakthrough occurred that would change the direction of the investigation forever. One of the lead detectives noticed a discolored, matted clump of what appeared to be human hair. On closer inspection, they realized it was more than just hair. It was part of a severely damaged human body. Although the remains were in such poor condition that identifying distinct features or determining a cause of death immediately was out of the question, forensic experts quickly took possession of the fragments for thorough testing. Through a combination of dental analysis and other forensic methods, the examiners ultimately confirmed the worst. The remains belonged to Lorie Hacking. The news shocked the entire community and made official what many had already feared: that Lorie's disappearance was no innocent accident or random tragedy, but a deliberate crime. While the body's condition rendered it impossible for the coroners to specify an exact cause of death, the fact that Lorie's body had been dumped in a landfill and left to decay in anonymity bore out the investigators' initial suspicions. Mark Hacking, driven by his desire to maintain the elaborate fiction of his life, had indeed murdered his pregnant wife, then callously disposed of her remains. In the eyes of the police, this discovery was the final piece of evidence that solidified Mark's guilt. He had already confessed, yet a bizarre new twist emerged. The suspect abruptly refused to enter a guilty plea. Perhaps facing the looming specter of life behind bars led him to gamble on a more advantageous legal strategy, or perhaps he still clung to some last-ditch hope of escaping the full weight of the law. Whatever his thinking, it ran counter to everything Lorie's grieving family wanted. They pleaded with Mark, urging him to plead guilty and spare everyone a protracted, agonizing trial that would dredge up painful details. Eventually, Mark relented. He struck a plea deal with the prosecution, a decision that carried significant consequences for how this tragic case would be resolved. On April 15, 2005, Mark Hacking, by then notorious for both his lies and the cruelty of the crime, stood before a judge and pleaded guilty to the charge of murdering Lorie and concealing her body. In accordance with Utah state law at the time, he received a sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole. Initially, that possibility could come after a minimum of just 6 years, a detail that horrified many people who followed the case. The idea that anyone who killed his pregnant wife could be eligible for parole after just 6 years seems shockingly condescending. Yet it was the maximum penalty allowable by the statute as it existed. Recognizing the brutality and gravity of the offense, however, the Utah Parole Board soon clarified that Mark would likely spend at least 3 decades behind bars. Under their guidelines, the earliest year Mark could even submit a parole application would be 2035, meaning he would remain incarcerated well into middle age. With a trembling hand, he reached for the edge of the blanket. Slowly, he lifted it, and what he saw beneath struck him like a blow, sending a shiver down his spine. His breath caught in his throat as his eyes fell upon the lifeless body of Danielle Jones. She lay sprawled across the cold, hard floor, her form eerily still. The signs of a brutal attack were impossible to miss. The injuries she bore told a haunting story of relentless violence, each mark a testament to the horrors she had endured. The silence was deafening, the atmosphere thick with a palpable sense of loss and dread. Danielle Finley Jones was born on October 20, 1991 in Cranebrook, nestled in western Sydney. Born as the youngest of 2 children, Danielle had a childhood shaped by the close bond she shared with her older brother, Blake. Caring Blake was her steadfast guardian and her childhood hero. Their family, however, experienced an early fracture. When Danielle was just 4 years old, her parents' marriage dissolved, leading to a pivotal moment that would define much of her early life. After the divorce, Danielle and Blake remained with their mother, Jacqueline, a determined woman who became both a maternal and paternal figure to her children. Their father, by contrast, faded into the background, playing little to no role in their upbringing. From an early age, Danielle demonstrated an insatiable passion for sports, a characteristic that set her apart from many of her peers. While other girls gravitated toward activities like dance or gymnastics, Danielle found herself drawn to the thrill of competition and the camaraderie of team sports. Soccer, in particular, became her greatest love. Her enthusiasm for the game was evident even as a young schoolgirl when she joined a local soccer club. Initially, she had to play on boys' teams because there were no girls' teams in her area. This challenge only fueled her determination. Over time, Danielle's natural talent and fierce dedication earned her the position of team captain. Her leadership on the field was matched by her exceptional skill, leading her to win numerous prestigious sports awards. Her teammates respected her fans admired her, and her opponents feared her prowess on the field. Danielle's success in soccer extended beyond her playing years. As she grew older, she began coaching youth teams, imparting her knowledge and passion to the next generation of players. In 2017, she reached a significant milestone in her career when she became the face of a major promotional campaign for women's soccer. Her involvement brought increased visibility to the sport, inspiring countless young girls. Her academic pursuits were as ambitious as her athletic endeavors. After graduating high university, Danielle enrolled at the University of Sydney, where she studied education and social work. Her choice of study reflected her compassionate nature and her desire to make a difference in people's lives. Following her graduation, Danielle secured a position as a teacher at a local school. Balancing her career in education with her ongoing commitment to sports, she exemplified the qualities of a driven, multifaceted individual. Friends and acquaintances often describe Danielle as a vibrant and engaging personality. Her striking features and athletic physique drew attention, but it was her kindness and willingness to help others that truly set her apart. People naturally gravitated toward her, captivated by her charisma and warmth. Despite her many admirers, Danielle remained focused on her career, often prioritizing them over her personal life. Romantic relationships, while not absent, took a distant back seat to her professional and athletic ambitions. Even as she built her independent life, Danielle chose to continue living in her mother Jacqueline's home. The bond between mother and daughter was extraordinary, transcending the typical parent-child relationship. They were best friends and inseparable companions. They spent nearly all their free time together, attending concerts, social events, and even nights out at clubs. Their relationship was by complete transparency, with no secrets or serious disagreements ever coming between them. As Danielle approached her 30th birthday, she began to reevaluate her life. She had achieved financial stability, built a solid career, and maintained a wide circle of friends. Yet, a sense of loneliness lingered. For all her accomplishments, Danielle yearned for a deeper connection, a love that would bring meaning and partnership to her life. She dreamed of finding someone she could trust implicitly, someone to share her dreams and build a future with. While she had dated and received ample attention from men, Danielle's relationships had always been short-lived. She was quick to end things if they interfered with her goals, and she had yet to find someone she could envision as a life partner. Now, however, she was ready for something more serious, something lasting. To broaden her chances of meeting the right person, Danielle turned to social media and dating apps. Though her social media profiles were already brimming with messages from admirers, she believed that a more dedicated platform might yield a genuine connection. Encouraged by friends, she created a profile on a popular dating app. The process was not without its frustrations. Months of swiping and chatting yielded little more than fleeting conversations and unremarkable dates. But then one day, Danielle received a message that stood out. It was from a man named Ashley Goy. Ashley, 4 years her senior, presented himself as friendly, kind, and charming. Their initial online exchanges quickly blossomed into a lively and engaging dialogue. After a week of texting, Ashley suggested meeting in person. Danielle agreed, and their first date proved to be a resounding success. The two talked endlessly, sharing stories and laughter that made the hours slip by unnoticed. It felt as though they had known each other for years. With an instant connection and many shared interests, Ashley was charismatic and charming, winning Danielle over with his humor and warmth. After just a couple of dates, Danielle was so impressed with Ashley that she decided to introduce him to her mother. Jacqueline, known for her keen intuition and protective nature, was equally charmed by Ashley's charisma and manners. She gave him her wholehearted approval, seeing in him the qualities of a great husband and a devoted father. Danielle felt reassured by her mother's acceptance, but the beautiful phase of their relationship didn't last long. Ashley's true personality began to surface, and it revealed a much darker side of him. He was controlling and deeply jealous, traits that would have sent alarm bells ringing for most. Surprisingly, Danielle didn't view these behaviors as problematic. Instead, she found them flattering, interpreting his possessiveness as a sign of profound love and affection. She had never been in a relationship where someone tried to influence her decisions so assertively, and this new dynamic intrigued her. Within a month of dating, Ashley's controlling tendencies escalated. He began dictating whom Danielle could see, where she could go, and even how she should spend her free time. His jealousy extended to her social connections, leading him to insist that she reduce her interactions with certain friends. Despite these glaring red flags, Danielle chose not to confront the situation. She rationalized his behavior, convincing herself that his actions stemmed from a place of care and protection. Danielle's lack of experience with serious relationships likely contributed to her inability to recognize the toxic pattern forming. Ashley, for his part, continued to present himself as a kind and caring partner. He spoke often of his dreams of starting a family, a vision that resonated deeply with Danielle. His words seemed genuine, further solidifying her trust in him. Yet, cracks in his facade were becoming increasingly evident to those around her. One of Danielle's close friends, a perceptive and outspoken woman, was the first to voice her concerns. She observed that Ashley's jealousy occasionally morphed into erratic behavior, making him seem like an entirely different person. She urged Danielle to be cautious, but Danielle, blinded by her emotions, dismissed her friend's warnings as unwarranted. In their short time together, Danielle had introduced Ashley to her a select few close friends. However, most people in her social circle only knew about him through her stories. On Saturday, December 17th, 2022, Danielle organized a gathering at a popular city bar, intending to formally introduce Ashley to more of her friends. The group congregated at the lively venue, enjoying an evening filled with laughter, dancing, and drinks. Ashley, as always, was the picture of charm. He was outgoing, polite, and seemingly at ease in the social setting. Throughout the evening, he and Danielle stayed close, holding hands and exchanging affectionate smiles. To everyone present, they appeared to be the epitome of a happy and loving couple. There was no visible sign of tension or discord. In the past, she had refrained from introducing her boyfriends to her friends, as she had never envisioned those relationships becoming long-term commitments. This time, however, she presented Ashley with a level of seriousness that caught many by surprise. Her friends recognized how much this relationship meant to her and were supportive, even if some had lingering reservations about Ashley. Everything seemed perfect until someone in the group suggested a game involving bold and provocative questions, which everyone would answer randomly. The game, intended to be lighthearted and entertaining, involved participants answering randomly drawn questions. Laughter filled the room as people came up with creative and quirky prompts, adding to the festive atmosphere. When it was Danielle's turn, she drew a question that asked if she had ever had a one-night stand with a stranger. The room fell silent, the playful atmosphere momentarily suspended. Danielle, visibly embarrassed, hesitated before offering a shy smile and admitting that she had. Ashley's reaction was immediate and shocking, a violent storm of emotions that caught everyone in the room off guard. His demeanor shifted abruptly, his previously composed expression darkening into something sinister. He locked his gaze on Danielle with a mixture of anger and disbelief, his eyes narrowing as his jaw clenched. Without hesitation, he grabbed her roughly by the arm, yanking her toward him with a force that made her stumble slightly. His voice erupted, loud and harsh, cutting through the lively chatter of the room like a knife. He accused Danielle of being irresponsible and immoral, his words laced with venom. The language he used was both offensive and demeaning, painting a picture of a man who had completely lost control of his emotions. The other guests, frozen in their seats, looked on in stunned silence. For a moment, they were unsure if this was some kind of sick joke or a genuine outburst. As Ashley's tirade continued, the mood in the room turned tense and deeply uncomfortable. Danielle, caught completely off guard, stood rooted to the spot, her expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. She struggled to comprehend why Ashley had chosen to lash out at her so publicly. his anger disproportionate to the situation. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she attempted to respond, but the torrent of accusations left her fumbling for words. Ashley's voice grew even louder, his accusations becoming more pointed and personal. He claimed that during their first date, he had asked Danielle a similar question about fleeting romantic encounters, and she had denied ever having such an experience. Now her admission in front of others felt to him like a deliberate betrayal. Each word he spoke was sharper than the last, cutting into Danielle's confidence and leaving her shaken. She instinctively tried to diffuse the conflict, speaking in soothing tones and attempting to calm him down. However, her efforts were met with hostility. Ashley rudely pushed her away, his face twisted with fury, before storming out of the bar in a dramatic exit that left everyone speechless. Outside, Ashley's anger showed no signs of abating. He paced back and forth in the dimly lit parking lot, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he immediately began furiously typing a barrage of text messages to Danielle. Each message was more accusatory and degrading than the last, a relentless stream of venomous words. Danielle, wanting to avoid further escalation, apologized profusely to her friends for the scene, her voice trembling as she assured them she would try to calm Ashley down by speaking to him face to face. With a deep breath, she stepped outside to confront him. After about 15 tense minutes, Danielle returned to the bar with Ashley by her side. They rejoined the group as though nothing had happened, their faces betraying little of the earlier conflict. While the tension between them was palpable, no one dared to mention the incident, choosing instead to let the night continue without further disruption. The group rationalized Ashley's behavior as a result of alcohol, stress, and nerves about meeting new people. The remainder of the evening passed without incident, with Ashley appearing subdued and polite for the rest of the night. His sudden shift in demeanor was as jarring as his earlier outburst, leaving many unsure of what to make of him. As the clock struck midnight, the group began to disperse. Danielle, aware of the long journey back to her home, had already made arrangements to spend the night at his friend Taylor's house along with Ashley. Taylor, ever the gracious host, had no objections to accommodating the couple. He lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, just a 20-minute drive from the bar. Taylor's girlfriend, Rachel, who had refrained from drinking that night, volunteered to drive them home. Once they arrived, Taylor prepared a cozy guest room for Danielle and Ashley. The room was located on the lower level of the house and featured a spacious bedroom with its own private bathroom. Its small, high-placed windows allowed only a sliver of light to enter, but the room was otherwise comfortable and welcoming. Danielle and Ashley thanked Taylor for his hospitality before retreating to the guest room for the night. By all appearances, the earlier argument was forgotten, and the couple seemed calm and composed. Danielle, ever the optimist, hoped that the worst was behind them and that the rest of the night would pass peacefully. At around 3 a.m., Taylor was roused from his sleep by strange noises emanating from the guest room. The faint thuds and muffled sounds were barely audible, but they carried an unsettling undertone that sent a chill down his spine. He strained his ears, trying to make sense of the sounds. Beside him, Rachel stirred, her expression mirroring his confusion. "What's that?" she whispered, her voice tinged with unease. Taylor shook his head, unsure of how to respond. The noises persisted, faint but rhythmic, like something heavy being moved or dropped. Assuming that the couple had reconciled and were sharing an intimate moment, Taylor and Rachel dismissed the noises as a private matter and drifted back to sleep. The house fell silent within minutes after Taylor and Rachel had dismissed the unsettling noises from the guest room. Morning arrived, and it wasn't until 10:30 a.m. that Taylor and Rachel finally woke up, feeling rested and refreshed. Initially, they were only mildly surprised by the absence of their noise from the guests, assuming Danielle and Ashley were still catching up on sleep after the previous night's events. They carried on with their morning routine, choosing to respect their guests' privacy. However, as the hours slipped by and they edged closer to 2 p.m. without any sign of movement from the guest room, a sense of unease began to creep in. Taylor decided to investigate. He approached the door cautiously, knocking softly at first. When no response came, he knocked louder, the sound echoing in the stillness of the hallway. The silence on the other side of the door was suffocating, and an inexplicable sense of dread settled over him. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Taylor hesitated for a moment before carefully turning the knob and pushing the door open. The sight that greeted him was both eerie and deeply unsettling. At first glance, the room appeared empty. The bed was unmade. Danielle's clothes were draped neatly over a chair, and her shoes were lined up by the floor. Taylor's eyes were drawn to a blanket crumpled on the floor near the wall. Something about its placement struck him as odd. Beneath the fabric, a peculiar shape caused his heart to pound. He stepped closer. With a shaky hand, he lifted the edge of the blanket, and what lay beneath turned his blood cold. Danielle's lifeless body was sprawled across the floor, stripped of clothing and bearing the unmistakable signs of a brutal attack. Her face was disfigured, a horrifying mess of blood and injuries that testified to the relentless violence she had endured. The room was deathly still, her body cold and rigid, the passage of time since her death evident. Ashley was nowhere to be seen. Taylor's panicked gaze darted around the room, finally landing on the small, partially open window near the ceiling. It provided a chilling clue to Ashley's likely escape route. Overwhelmed by a surge of fear and panic, Taylor bolted from the room and raced upstairs to inform Rachel of the grisly discovery. His words came out in a frantic rush, barely coherent, but the urgency in his tone conveyed everything. Rachel, shaken to her core, grabbed her phone with trembling hands and immediately called the police and emergency services, her voice faltering as she relayed the details of the situation. When paramedics arrived, it was tragically too late for Danielle. The moment they examined her, they confirmed what had already become painfully clear. Danielle was dead. According to their initial assessment, her death had occurred around 3 a.m., aligning with the time Taylor and Rachel had heard the strange noises from the guest room. The weight of their realization was crushing. Had they acted upon those sounds, they might have intervened in time to save her life. Danielle's body was transported to the forensic laboratory, where a detailed examination revealed the extent of the horrifying violence she had suffered. The findings painted a gruesome picture of the relentless brutality inflicted. Her body bore numerous contusions and abrasions, evidence of a savage beating. The injuries to her face were particularly serious. She had a broken nose, a broken jaw, and a broken cheekbone. Several teeth had been knocked out, and a closed skull fracture accompanied by multiple brain hemorrhages spoke to the ferocity of the blows she had endured. The forensic analysis revealed that her attacker had overpowered her, pinning her to the ground to prevent her escape. He had covered her mouth to silence her cries, rendering her utterly defenseless. The assault alternated between punches and strangulation, each strike delivered with unrelenting aggression and fury. The ultimate cause of Danielle's death was determined to be mechanical asphyxiation. She had been strangled with bare hands, her airway forcibly compressed until she could no longer breathe. The brutal nature of her death underscored the ferocity of her attacker's intentions. Forensic investigators uncovered damning evidence that pointed directly to Ashley as the perpetrator. He had made no attempt to hide his crime, washing the blood from his hands in the bathroom before calmly dressing himself and escaping through the window. His fingerprints, left on the window frame, provided conclusive proof of his presence. Detectives soon uncovered a critical witness who reported seeing a man walking away from Taylor's house around 4:30 a.m. Although the neighbor could not provide a detailed description of the man's face, they noted that his clothing matched what Ashley had been wearing that night. This testimony became a pivotal piece of evidence, helping investigators confirm the timeline of events. Eager to gather more information, detectives reached out to Ashley's cell phone provider and successfully obtained a recording of a call he had made to his mother at approximately 4 a.m., mere minutes after the crime was committed. The contents of this call offered a chilling glimpse into Ashley's state of mind. On the recording, Ashley could be heard crying uncontrollably, his voice shaky and frantic as he repeatedly insisted that he hadn't done anything wrong. Desperately, he claimed that someone else had entered the room and attacked Danielle. His tone was a peculiar mix of panic and self-reassurance, as if he was trying to convince both his mother and himself of this fabricated version of events. Ashley's oversight in failing to turn off his phone after the call ultimately proved to be his downfall. Authorities were able to track his location using the device's signal, which led them to a remote mountainous area. There, Ashley had taken refuge, seemingly attempting to disappear into the desolate wilderness. Police found him near a scenic overlook by a steep cliff, sitting alone in the cold, barren landscape. When officers cautiously approached, Ashley sprang to his feet in a burst of panic and leapt over the safety barrier. He clung to the edge of the cliff, his body precariously balanced as he shouted at the officers to stay back. His voice trembled with desperation as he threatened to jump if anyone came closer. Recognizing the delicacy of the situation, authorities quickly summoned specially trained negotiators and psychologists to the scene. These experts engaged Ashley in a tense and painstakingly careful standoff, attempting to de-escalate his heightened emotional state. They assured him repeatedly that if he was truly innocent, he had nothing to fear and urged him to step away from the edge. For nearly 12 grueling hours, the negotiations dragged on, with Ashley refusing to budge. Exhaustion began to take its toll on him as midnight approached, his grip on the edge weakening and his responses growing less coherent. In a fleeting moment of distraction, officers seized the opportunity to act. Moving swiftly and decisively, they grabbed Ashley and pulled him back to safety, ending the standoff. Following his rescue, Ashley's behavior became increasingly erratic and unhinged. He screamed incoherently, resisted the officers' attempts to calm him, and repeatedly threatened to take his own life. His volatile state rendered any attempts at questioning him impossible. Recognizing the severity of his condition, authorities transported him to a psychiatric facility where medical professionals worked tirelessly to stabilize him. After thorough evaluation, it was determined that Ashley had been in an extreme state of emotional distress and was likely on the verge of acting on his suicidal threats. In the weeks that followed, Ashley underwent a series of psychiatric evaluations. He was diagnosed with several psychological disorders, including excitable psychopathy, a condition characterized by sudden outbursts of rage, impulsive behavior, and episodes of unprovoked aggression. This diagnosis provided investigators and mental health professionals with some insight into Ashley's volatile and violent tendencies, but it offered little solace to those mourning Danielle's tragic loss. As investigators delved deeper into Ashley Goy's past, they uncovered a disturbing and deeply troubling pattern of behavior. Danielle was far from his first victim. Over the preceding years, more than 10 women had filed police reports against Ashley, detailing chilling accounts of physical assaults, stalking, and harassment. These reports painted a harrowing picture of a man whose actions were not only predatory, but also systematically overlooked by the justice system. As it turned out, Ashley's behavior was rooted in a troubled childhood. He had grown up in a chaotic household marked by the absence of a father figure and the heavy burden of untreated mental health issues. From a young age, Ashley exhibited patterns of extreme aggression and erratic behavior, often targeting those closest to him. His first victims were his own family, his mother and 2 younger sisters. They bore the brunt of his violent outbursts in silence, too frightened of the potential consequences to report him. As Ashley entered his teenage years, his aggressive tendencies only intensified. Teachers and peers described him as unpredictable, prone to sudden mood swings that often escalated into physical confrontations. His charm and good looks masked a deeply troubled psyche, allowing him to manipulate those around him with alarming ease. To the outside world, Ashley maintained the facade of a calm and rational individual. But those who knew him best understood the fragile nature of this illusion. The smallest perceived slight could shatter his composed exterior, unleashing a side of him that was nothing short of monstrous. Ashley's instability became increasingly pronounced, particularly in his interactions with women. Despite his volatile nature and deeply ingrained behavioral issues, Ashley's good looks and natural charm allowed him to form romantic relationships with alarming ease. However, beneath his seemingly magnetic exterior lurked a dangerous and predatory mindset. Ashley developed intense and obsessive fixations on his romantic partners, viewing them not as individuals with their own agency, but as possessions to control and dominate. Any attempt by his partners to assert independence or disagree with him was met with swift and severe retaliation, often in the form of physical aggression. When relationships ended, Ashley's behavior escalated even further. Unable to accept rejection, he began stalking and, in many instances, physically attacking his former partners. This troubling pattern of behavior became increasingly apparent between 2015 and 2021. During this 6-year period, at least 11 women came forward to file official complaints against him for harassment, assault, and threats of violence. Disturbingly, Ashley's manipulative tendencies often extended to the legal realm. In 4 of these cases, he managed to intimidate or emotionally coerce the victims into withdrawing their complaints, leaving them vulnerable to further harm. The remaining women, however, pursued legal action, resulting in restraining orders meant to keep Ashley at bay. Unfortunately, these measures proved to be woefully inadequate. In early 2021, Ashley's violence reached a horrifying peak when he brutally assaulted a girlfriend during a violent altercation, nearly strangling her in the process. The woman displayed remarkable courage by bringing the case to court. Ashley was found guilty, but the consequences of his actions were shockingly lenient. Instead of a meaningful punishment, he was sentenced to a fine community service and a restraining order that emboldened him rather than deterred him. Just months after this conviction, Ashley attacked another woman, inflicting severe physical injuries that left her traumatized. This victim barely managed to escape and promptly reported the incident to the authorities, accusing Ashley of attempted murder. In response, the court ordered him to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. The assessment confirmed what many already feared. Ashley posed a high risk of reoffending and displayed deeply rooted tendencies toward violent and impulsive behavior. Despite these damning findings, the court's response was once again alarmingly lenient. Ashley received a mere 3-month jail sentence and was ordered to pay restitution to the victim. No significant efforts were made to monitor or rehabilitate him upon his release. By 2022, Ashley's violent tendencies had spiraled further out of control. After yet another former girlfriend ended their relationship, Ashley broke into her home late at night with the intent to harm her. He attempted to strangle her in a frenzied attack, but her screams alerted her parents, who rushed to her aid. Their timely intervention likely saved her life. Police were called to the scene, and Ashley was arrested. Despite the egregious nature of his crime, the court's response was once again inadequate. Ashley was sentenced to 6 months in jail, but served only 3.5 months before being released. It was shortly after this release that Ashley crossed paths with Danielle Jones. The brutal murder of Danielle sent shockwaves through the community, drawing widespread media attention and public outrage. Newspapers ran extensive coverage of the case, while news broadcasts dedicated entire segments to the unfolding investigation. As the story gained traction, 3 additional women came forward to police, revealing their own harrowing experiences with Ashley. These women had previously remained silent, paralyzed by fear of retaliation. Their accounts painted a chilling portrait of Ashley's predatory nature. They described how he initially presented himself as kind, attentive, and charming, only to reveal his true nature after a few dates. The testimonies detailed how Ashley would attack, beat, and, in many cases, attempt to strangle his victims. Notably, he never relied on weapons. His violence was inflicted solely with his bare hands, a chilling testament to the physical dominance he wielded over his victims. The consistency of these accounts painted an irrefutable picture of a serial predator whose charm masked a deeply violent and dangerous personality. The victims' testimonies underscored the gravity of the systemic failures that had allowed Ashley to evade significant consequences for so long. They voiced their fears that, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, Ashley might once again escape with minimal punishment. Their concerns were rooted in a painful reality. Time and again, the justice system had failed to protect them and hold Ashley accountable. As the trial progressed, the weight of evidence against Ashley became insurmountable. The forensic findings, combined with witness testimonies and Ashley's own documented history of violence, left no doubt about his guilt. This time, it appeared that justice might finally catch up to him. Ashley Goy had committed a heinous act, and the overwhelming evidence ensured that he would not evade accountability once more. However, on April 6, 2024, before the official sentencing could take place, Ashley was found hanging in his jail cell. Although it appeared that he had committed suicide, his behavior raised questions. Ashley showed no remorse for his actions and was confident he would be declared insane, which would land him in a more comfortable psychiatric facility rather than a prison cell. Given these circumstances, some suspected that Ashley's cellmates might have played a role in his death, particularly since he had reportedly attacked them on multiple occasions. The murder of Danielle devastated her family, leaving them grief-stricken and determined to prevent similar tragedies. In the wake of their loss, they launched a campaign advocating for stricter regulations on dating apps. Their proposal included mandatory background checks that would automatically flag users with serious criminal histories, providing potential partners with critical information before entering a relationship. Their hope was to create a safer environment for others.